China claims India के कुछ part are integral part of China. Like China should basically have hold of them, whether it is Sikkim, as you mentioned, Arunachal Pradesh, or anyways, I think northeast side में China हर जगह पे entry करने का try करता रहता है constantly. So just to understand, I think I want to come to 1962 from here because this is the first time जब हम एक बड़ी battle में जाते हैं China के साथ और काफी problem होती है उस time पे, but from the same perspective, if you can just make us understand कि from the map perspective, just from the boundary perspective, why is China viewing कि north east का बहुत सारा part China का है, right? And how has that led to the conflict of, let's say, 1962, which happened where probably India suffered a loss from China?
देखिए उसमें ऐसा है कि 1962 war was driven by the Chinese. उसके पहले अगर हम थोड़ी कुछ साल उसके जो the history pertaining to the years of the 50s अगर देखें तो India and China generally had good relations in the early 50s, but the Chinese plans were always there. The Chinese plans were what? अभी अगर हम चाइना को देखें कि China was not India's neighbor. India's neighbor was Tibet. लेकिन चाइना ने आकर के 1950 में तिब्बत में जब तिब्बत को चाइना ने कैप्चर किया, इन्वेड किया, और तिब्बत पे आकर के जब चाइनीज फोर्सेस बैठे तो चाइना became India's immediate neighbor. After that, China believed, and Chinese beliefs are not based on any international, are not aligned many times with the international belief systems. It is driven by their own beliefs. The Chinese believe this. The Chinese think that this is the boundary. The Chinese believe that is the land. So ये जो उनकी जो सोच थी कि अरुणाचल में लेह लद्दाख साइड में and along several areas, tracts of land, etc. belong to China was a Chinese belief. And China, so all of those reasons were there. They were the India-China, Sino-Indian dispute-related reasons which China believed that land was theirs, and therefore they must come and occupy that. That was a Chinese belief.
Sorry to cut you. So when you say belief, you mean कि उसके पीछे कोई भी लॉजिक नहीं है, उसके पीछे कोई भी ऐसे रीजंस नहीं है कि मे बी फॉर एग्जांपल इफ इंडिया बिलीव्स कि पाकिस्तान इंडिया का होना चाहिए, सो द बिलीफ कैन आल्सो कम फ्रॉम द फैक्ट कि पाकिस्तान वाज वंस इंडियाज पार्ट. Britishers led to creating a new country. Although we don't believe that, but let's say if India believes that. But China अगर किसी पार्ट पे, किसी स्पेसिफिक जोग्राफिकल एरिया पे अपना क्लेम मानता है तो उसके पीछे का कोई भी मतलब there is no logic to it. It's just a belief.
No, so there is. You see, we have to go back to, specific nuances. जो 1914 में एक agreement साइन हुई थी. तो जब वो अग्रीमेंट साइन हुई थी चाइना में, चाइनीज इंडिया साइनो इंडियन बाउंड्री इज 3888 किलोमीटर्स टू बी प्रिसाइज. और इसके 3 सेक्टर्स, नॉर्दर्न सेक्टर, मिडिल सेक्टर एंड ईस्टर्न सेक्टर. सो ईस्टर्न सेक्टर में मैकमोहन लाइन है और आपके जॉनसन आर्डाग लाइन है. दीज आर द लाइंस दैट सेपरेट इंडिया एंड चाइना. दीज आर द सो ये जो अग्रीमेंट 1914 में साइन हुई थी बिटवीन इंडिया, तो उसमें क्या हुआ था कि एज आई सेड तिब्बत वाज इंडियाज नेबर एट दैट टाइम. सो तिब्बत से एमिसरी आए थे, एक चाइनीज एमिसरी भी आए थे, बट वो साइन जब हुई थी, ट्राइपार्टाइट अग्रीमेंट वाज साइंड इन 1914 व्हिच डिमार्केटेड द बाउंड्रीज. I'm just giving you a little in brief that the China believes, to your question, so China believed that these boundaries were a result of the imperial rule, were decided during the imperial rule, and therefore they do not agree to them. And they believe that तो उस हिसाब से they don't believe that those are lines that they agree to, and their understanding, their perception, therefore, is different from India's perception, and their understanding of the Sino-Indian boundary is further south of where India's understanding is. So south बोलेंगे तो आप इंडिया की टेरिटरी में आ रहे हैं. So their perception is driven by that, and their claim was that you believe in what the imperial regime during the Raj, during the British times, those were decided, and that is what India believes in, which China does not agree to, which is what the basic disagreement had been from the Chinese side. अब क्या हुआ? हाँ, अब उसके बाद में रिलेशन चाइना started making incursions. अब incursions किया आपने तो इंडिया में पार्लियामेंट में उसके बारे में चर्चा हुई. 1950s में चाइना ने अक्साई चीन के वहां पे रोड्स बनाने शुरू कर दिए. अब जब शुरू कर दिए थे तो इंडिया was caught by surprise because, as I said, India's focus was not as much on international security at that time in the early years, for the right or the wrong reasons, and I would think for the wrong reasons, because India did not actually focus on its borders, its forward areas, in say the areas of Aksai Chin wherein China was making roads. It is only by surprise that Prime Minister Nehru was once he was surprised when he was told that the Chinese had made roads in Aksai Chin, which to him was surprise because there was no the earlier intelligence which had come had been brushed aside, and therefore as I said, India did not have a proper understanding of its foreign policy priorities. Also, I must, we can always sit in 2023 and do a post-mortem, but it is also, let's also understand that India was a new nation as well. India was also learning a lot of things, and I think India made mistakes early on. Should India have made the mistakes? No. Whether India made the mistakes knowingly? No. I think there were mistakes because India's perceptions, India's understanding of its immediate neighborhood was wrong. And also, we did not have a sort of focused and committed intelligence services. We had an IT, Intelligence Bureau, which was headed by a gentleman called Malik. अब वो मलिक साहब जो बोलते थे प्राइम मिनिस्टर को, वही वो मतलब that used to become the gospel, and we did not have adequate understanding of the fact that the Chinese were making roads. And जब तक हमारे पास इंटेलिजेंस आई तो तब तक mid 1950s में चीनी रोड बना चुके थे. So the Chinese never believed that agreements. They never believed in staying true to agreements. So पंचशील जब इंडिया चाइना के बीच में जब पीस ट्रीटी हुई थी, उस वक्त चाइना यहाँ पे पीस ट्रीटी साइन कर रहे थे और वहाँ पे रोड्स बना रहे थे इंडियन टेरिटरी में अक्सर चीन, and India was not aware of it. So India's understanding and foreign relations in that period was based on transparency, but India should have understood better that China was not really meaning what they were saying at the agreements, because China was doing something else inside India's territory. तो वहाँ पे वो सब disagreement शुरू हुई. चाइना incursion करके हर जगह 1954 में एक बराहोती करके जगह थी, वहाँ पे Chinese forces came and surrounded an Indian post. तो कई ऐसे छोटे मोटे इंसिडेंट होते गए, और there was a disconnect between the political leadership and the military leadership. किस तरीके का डिस्कनेक्ट? 1959 में एक एक्सरसाइज, एक जो सर्वे रिसर्च एक्सरसाइज किया गया, उसका नाम था लाल किला. और वो लाल किला एक्सरसाइज में ये उसका आउटकम ये था कि इंडिया डज नॉट हैव एडिक्वेट प्रिपरेशंस, इक्विपमेंट, मैन पावर और ट्रेनिंग and capability to take on China in a full-scale war. This was the bottom line. But इस आउटकम जो रिपोर्ट थी, उसकी जो आउटकम थी, वो हमारे ने तो neither the political leadership nor the military leadership took cognizance of it. The political leadership did not take cognizance of it. The military leadership did not have the spine to stand up to the political leadership of that time. It's a fact of life. And 1959 में जो रिपोर्ट तैयार की गई थी जनरल थोराट द्वारा, वो उस वक्त के जो डिफेंस मिनिस्टर थे कृष्ण मेनन साहब ने वो प्राइम मिनिस्टर नेहरू के सामने पेश नहीं करी, और द प्राइम मिनिस्टर वाज unaware of how the defense minister Mr. Krishna Menon was operating or thinking, or what he was doing. I think there was a huge disconnect. Then defense minister Mr. Krishna Menon did not, he used to override the military thinking, the military leadership. The military leadership did not stand up to the political leadership where it thought that they were going wrong. And the result was the debacle of 1962. और जिस वॉर में इंडिया की सेटबैक्स हुई, जहां पे तो ये अगर हम 1962 का युद्ध देखें तो ये युद्ध एक पॉलिटिकल फेलियर था और ये मिलिट्री लीडरशिप का भी फेलियर था। लेकिन इस युद्ध में जहां पर भी इंडियन सोल्जर खड़ा होकर के लड़ा है, जहां पर इंडियन फोर्सेस लोकल कॉन्फ्लिक्ट्स में खड़े होकर लड़े हैं, वहां पे चीनी फोर्सेस को उन्होंने रोका है। They have managed to stop the Chinese. It is the model thinking and the leadership. I wouldn't blame people for the inability to defend. I would blame people for the inability to admit that they were not ready. I would blame people in terms of lacking the ability to be truthful to themselves. 1959 की आपकी रिपोर्ट थी जिसके तहत ये माना गया कि इंडिया was not ready, but the fact is you were not truthful to yourself. And given that India में military budgets were different, were far less, the equipment was not adequate, the people were not trained, I think it was cruel. It was absolutely brutal and cruel to expect the soldier to be fighting at sub-zero temperatures in frigid zones. और उस जगह पे उन पहाड़ियों पे सोल्जर्स को भेज करके उनसे एक्सपेक्ट करना कि they would really survive and fight was absolutely cruel. Not understanding the fact that we needed to have better capability is something that I would lay a lot of blame on the political and military leadership for committing the folly, despite knowing that, despite being aware of it. And I think it was also a battle of egos, which led to India's downfall at that time. लेकिन उसके बाद इंडिया had a change, and of course 1962 की जो ब्राइट साइड है वो ये थी कि उसके बाद में जो 1965 की लड़ाई और 1967 में जो नाथुला चोला की जो लड़ाइयाँ थी और 1971 में जो युद्ध था पाकिस्तान के विरुद्ध, उसमें हमने ये देखा कि the political and the military leadership, the military leadership was given the autonomy to function and to run a war as a military leadership should. It's not political. The political leadership has a say, but the military leadership must run its war on the battlefield.
थैंक यू दोस्तों, आपने इस क्लिप को देखा। अगर आपको ये क्लिप अच्छी लगी हो तो पूरे पॉडकास्ट को जरूर देखिए दोस्तों। काफी डिटेल में हमने बहुत सारे पॉइंट्स को डिस्कस किया है पॉडकास्ट में। लिंक आपको डिस्क्रिप्शन में मिल जाएगा। पॉडकास्ट को एंजॉय कीजिए और वीडियो को लाइक जरूर कीजिएगा, चैनल को भी सब्सक्राइब जरूर कीजिएगा।